Corporal Avery Collins faced relentless skepticism and hostility entering an elite sniper program at Fort Rivington, especially from Master Sergeant Slater. Undeterred, Avery, trained by her legendary grandfather, Master Sergeant Samuel Collins, remained resolute. During a live-fire exercise that became a real ambush in the Nevada mountains, she single-handedly neutralized three armed hostiles in under 10 seconds, saving her entire team. This awe-inspiring act shattered all doubts, earning her the Distinguished Service Medal and revealing her elite sniper bloodline. Her powerful speech challenged perceptions. But Avery's journey to redefine military tradition and leadership is far from over. What challenges await her next? If Avery's story of quiet strength and unwavering resolve moved you, please show your support. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and join us in celebrating unsung heroes and the powerful legacies they build. Your engagement helps us share more inspiring stories. Master Sergeant Slater's voice cracked through the still air of the rifle range like a whip, his words dripping with disdain. You think hitting bullseyes on a range makes you ready for war? Collins, here, you're just a liability with lip gloss. Avery Collins didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She remained silent, her eyes steady as she locked the bolt on her rifle, her hands moving with precise familiarity. The desert wind swept across the Nevada mountains, biting and dry, but it couldn't distract her. She raised her gaze to the horizon and waited, her mind as calm and focused as the surface of a still lake. Then, it happened. A sniper's shot rang out, sharp and final, a clean crack that echoed across the range. 3 enemy combatants fell before anyone had even moved for cover. As the dust settled, the team turned, not with mockery, but with a stunned silence. Every single man on her team was looking at her, not as the joke they had once seen, but as the woman who had just saved their lives. They had ridiculed her. They had doubted her. They had tried to break her, but they had underestimated her, and now, standing in front of them, was a woman trained in ways they couldn't even comprehend. Avery Collins had been taught by someone whose name they didn't even know, a legacy that lived in whispers, and she had just proven it with one flawless shot. The wind at Fort Rivington carried the dry sting of desert air, sweeping across the rifle range and settling in the folds of every soldier's uniform. It was the kind of place that burned away any pretensions, where every step, every shot, every movement had to be earned. For Avery Collins, walking into the elite sniper qualification program wasn't just another career milestone. It was personal. It was silent. She hadn't arrived with fanfare, no big speeches or warnings. There was no dramatic entrance. She simply appeared, blending into the background, letting her actions speak for themselves. Behind her quiet demeanor and unassuming stride was a legacy that few knew about. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Samuel Collins, had been a ghost in the jungles of Vietnam. He had over 200 confirmed kills, with a body count that was unofficial but far higher. He had trained with a deadly calm, never boasting about his skills, never bragging about his exploits. And he had passed that same quiet discipline on to her. Avery had been trained in the freezing mornings of Montana, where the cold could cut through you like a blade. He had taught her that no one needed to believe in her. She just needed to be unshakable. When Avery entered the program, she was the only woman among the 24 selected. That fact followed her like a shadow, a constant reminder that she didn't belong in the eyes of many of her peers. They didn't have to say much. One of them muttered under his breath as she unrolled her mat on the first morning, "Since when did the Army start issuing mascara with M24s? Another one grinned and added, "Careful, princess. Wouldn't want you to chip a nail on that bolt." But Master Sergeant Slater didn't laugh. He didn't make jokes. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to break her, to see if she had the strength to survive. With 4 combat deployments behind him and a reputation for creating or breaking future snipers, he made it clear that Avery's presence was an insult to him, a challenge he didn't take kindly to. "I've had to bury soldiers who were more prepared than you," Slater told her after her second drill. "You want my advice? Get out before someone else has to pay for your experiment." Every morning he found new ways to tighten the screws. He didn't just critique her skills, he tried to break her mentally. His tactical lectures turned into personal interrogations, designed to make her question herself, to force her to crack. He called her Collins the way some men call others a liability, the words sharp and biting. But Avery didn't respond. She didn't argue. Instead, she let her silence speak louder than any words could. She spent her nights cleaning her rifle alone while the other soldiers joked and swapped stories around the fire. She was used to this terrain, the resistance, the silent glares, the cold shoulders of men who didn't want her there. But she also knew something they didn't. She wasn't here to prove anything to them. She had already proven herself to someone who mattered far more. Samuel Collins hadn't trained her to be accepted. He had trained her to be unshakable. So when Slater sneered and spat the words that would haunt her for days, "You think hitting bullseyes makes you a warrior?" Avery didn't even blink. She didn't respond. She just exhaled, checked her scope, and aimed. 800 meters downrange, her target waited. Because warriors don't need permission. They don't need anyone's approval. They just need the shot. By the fourth week, it wasn't just the desert heat that was blistering Avery Collins. The real pressure came from the eyes of her fellow soldiers, the loaded words they didn't speak, the slow, deliberate removal of respect, piece by piece. The critics began to show in subtle ways. During inspection, Slater would find nearly invisible flaws in her equipment, pointing them out with a cold, deliberate sneer. It wasn't the errors that bothered her, it was the way he seemed to take pleasure in them, as if each minor mistake was another reason to dismiss her. But none of that mattered to Avery. She didn't need their respect. She didn't need their approval. She just needed to keep going. Avery's rifle hung loosely in her sling, its weight a constant reminder of the tension that had started to settle in her chest. She could feel it, an invisible pressure, the kind she had learned to ignore during earlier stages of training, when there were 5 other candidates ahead of her. Candidates who didn't make her feel like she was always one mistake away from being written off. But now, as she braced herself for the next test, the air felt different. Her focus was sharper, but so was the scrutiny. In field lectures, Master Sergeant Slater would throw out complex windage problems, testing the group's ability to adjust for target compensation. The math behind it wasn't hard to follow, but his interruptions were. He'd cut her off halfway through her answers with a dismissive scoff. Not fast enough, not good enough. In real combat, he'd say, "You're dead before you even finish your first sentence." Her jaw tightened. She tried not to let it get to her. She remembered what her grandfather always told her. They'll come for your mind long before they come for your shot. But this wasn't just about her skills anymore. Slater wasn't merely testing her limits. He was isolating her. And it worked. Slowly, she watched as the others, the soldiers she'd once stood alongside, began to drift away. It was subtle at first, a brief hesitation when she entered the room, a quick change of subject. By the time they were stationed at Meshal, the coldness was undeniable. Conversations tapered off when she walked by. No one was openly cruel, but the silent treatment spoke volumes. She wasn't part of the group anymore. To them, she was a nuisance, someone they had to tolerate or avoid altogether. The sting of their indifference cut deeper during the night drills. She was partnered with Corporal Jason Holt, a usually quiet soldier who, until that point, had never seemed to take sides. They were crawling through a dry creek bed, making their way toward a mock enemy position. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady, but it hit her harder than she expected. "Don't take this the wrong way," he said, keeping his eyes trained ahead, scanning for threats. "But have you ever thought maybe this isn't the place for you?" Avery paused, her breath caught, not from the words themselves, but from the hollow certainty in his tone. It was as if he wasn't just asking a question. He was already convinced. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Later that night, in the cold, still darkness of the barracks, Avery sat on the edge of her bunk. Her boots were still dusty from the range. Her mind, however, felt like it had been run through a grinder. She reached down into her rucksack and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. There was no name, no signature, just 4 words, written in thick, blocky handwriting. "Request transfer before regret." On the back, scrawled smaller, were the words, "Before you get someone killed." Avery sat motionless for a moment, the paper crinkling in her hands. She wasn't sure which hurt more, the words themselves or the fact that someone had taken the time to slip this under her things. The doubt that it planted was like a seed sprouting in the dark corners of her mind, growing faster than she could stop it. But then she reached for something else. She pulled out the letter from her grandfather, the one she always kept hidden in her footlocker. It was worn soft from years of handling, creased in ways that told the story of sleepless nights. "Fire for those who can't," it read. "But remember, sometimes the one who needs defending the most is the warrior standing alone." Avery blinked hard, pushing the burn in her eyes away. She had always understood the words, but tonight they hit differently. This wasn't just about her marksmanship. No, this was about breaking her from the inside out. Slater didn't need to fail her on the range. He just needed to make her feel like she was a liability. He needed to plant seeds of doubt, to create enough suspicion among her peers that they'd turn their backs on her. And she could feel it happening, slowly but unmistakably. She folded the note and placed it in her footlocker, beside the letter. Her fingers brushed against the edges of the paper as she closed the latch, a silent promise to herself. She wasn't going to let Slater succeed. Without a second thought, she pulled her rifle from its place and began cleaning it with methodical precision. Every movement was deliberate. Every part of the weapon, once disassembled, was carefully inspected and put back together. Her mind was already sharpening itself, her resolve hardening with each motion. The war for respect had gone silent, but in Avery's eyes, the next shot had already been fired. The mountains of Nevada were harsh and unforgiving, jagged ridgelines that tore through the sky like the teeth of a predator. The air was bone dry, the wind relentless, cutting into the lungs with every breath. It was the perfect backdrop for what was coming. The final exam. Week 6. The ultimate evaluation. A full-scale live-fire exercise that would simulate real-world combat conditions, testing every soldier's ability to adapt, survive, and execute under extreme pressure. The terrain stretched across 30 square miles, a vast expanse of unforgiving rock and dirt. The mission was simple, or so it seemed: infiltrate, locate a hidden objective, secure critical intel, and extract under enemy fire. No safety nets. There would be no room for mistakes, no second chances. The twist? Each team would be operating with complete autonomy, far removed from the safety of instructors in real combat. There was no room for mistakes. With live ammunition in the field, any errors could lead to injury or worse. And if things went awry, there would be no do-overs. It was a harsh reality that every soldier had to face. When the teams were announced, Slater's grin widened. "Collins," he barked, "you're with me on Alpha Team." His tone was curt, but Avery didn't flinch. She simply nodded, her expression unreadable, and slung her pack over her shoulder. It was clear that Slater expected her to fall in line without question. The mission began at dawn, the sky barely hinting at the light of day. 5 soldiers moved out, Slater leading the charge, Corporal Jason Holt following closely behind, and Avery assigned to communications. Slater's deliberate choice to put her in that position wasn't lost on her. It was a calculated insult. "You're the ears, Collins," he had sneered. "Let the shooters handle the real work." For 6 hours, they navigated the winding hills and treacherous ridgelines, working their way toward the objective. It was a small communications relay, cleverly concealed inside a natural rock outcropping. Avery remained vigilant, monitoring the radio for any updates, her mind sharp. Then, the unexpected happened. The faint crackle in her earpiece made her pause, a signal that something was wrong. But the voice that came through wasn't one of the instructors. It was much more urgent. "Control to all units," the voice barked. "Code black. Repeat, code black. This is not a drill. Perimeter breach. Armed unknowns confirmed inside the training zone. Engage only if necessary. Evac point change to grid Foxtrot 9. Before Avery could even process the message, the unmistakable sound of a shot rang out, splitting the air like thunder. The bullet impacted the dirt just inches from Holt's boot. Instincts took over as the team dove for cover. They were exposed, no camouflage, no overhead shelter, just open hillside and scattered rocks. The shots continued to crack through the air, closer now. Slater scrambled for a boulder, yelling into his radio, "Control, say again, who the hell is in our zone?" Another shot. Holt let out a cry of pain, clutching his arm where the bullet had grazed him. Blood began to pool on the dirt. Then a silence fell, a heavy, suffocating quiet that pressed against their chests, daring them to breathe. Avery didn't hesitate. While the others cowered, scrambling for cover, she moved, low and fast, her rifle already raised, scanning the ridge. Every step was deliberate. Her training kicked in, her mind calm, focused. As her eyes darted across the ridge, a glint of sunlight reflected off something metallic. A sniper's scope, just beyond a patch of brush about 600 meters up the ridgeline. Avery's heart rate didn't quicken. She exhaled, gently squeezed the trigger. Crack. The sniper collapsed behind the brush like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The team froze in stunned silence. But Avery wasn't finished. She spotted two more figures behind a fallen log, trying to flank them. Without hesitation, she pivoted. Crack. Crack. Both men fell without ever taking another step. 3 shots, 3 hostiles down, and all in less than 10 seconds. Silence followed, but this time it was different. He felt it. Behind her, Slater emerged from cover, his face stunned, his jaw slack. His rifle was still raised uselessly, his gaze fixed on her. The others were frozen too, even Holt, blood still oozing from his arm, blinking in disbelief. Very. Slater's voice was almost breathless. Where did you learn to do that? She stood slowly, reloading her rifle with practiced ease, her hands steady as a rock. She didn't flinch, not even for a second. As she glanced back at Slater, her eyes were calm, but there was a quiet pride there. My grandfather, she said softly, her voice almost distant. Samuel Collins, Vietnam Special Forces, over 200 confirmed eliminations. She met Slater's eyes, and for the first time since they had met, he looked away. He started training me when I was 6, she continued, her voice steady. Taught me how to track, how to breathe, move, and wait. He taught me how to shoot without flinching. He taught me how to see before anyone even knows what they're looking for. Slater didn't speak. He couldn't. The woman he had tried to humiliate for 6 weeks had just saved every single man on his team. Avery lifted her rifle again, shouldering it with effortless grace, and glanced toward the horizon. Evac waiting at Foxtrot 9, she said evenly. Let's move. There were no protests, no laughter, just quiet obedience. And for the first time since she had arrived, Avery Collins walked point. 3 weeks passed since that ambush in the Nevada mountains. The bruises on their bodies had faded, but the whispers in the military community were persistent. The headlines never came, but that didn't matter. Word spread like wildfire through the ranks. Corporal Avery Collins wasn't just another trainee. She was the sniper who had taken down 3 armed hostiles in under 10 seconds. She was the soldier who had saved her entire team. And now her name carried weight, a weight that demanded respect. Avery had always kept to herself. At Fort Rivington, she was known for the quiet way she moved through each day. She didn't seek attention, no applause. No applause was needed. The letter she carried, her grandfather's, was tucked close to her heart, folded neatly in the breast pocket of her uniform. She hadn't come to the military for recognition or fame. She came because it was her legacy, passed down from bloodlines soaked in history. That, above all, was the reason she was here. But no matter how quietly she lived, some moments could not be ignored. The day the base's auditorium buzzed with low electric energy, Avery could feel the change in the air. It was a morning like no other. The place was packed, the folding chairs nearly groaning under the weight of uniforms and polished boots. Officers in their dress blues sat side by side with instructors and new recruits. Even a few civilians from the Pentagon, some of the highest ranking, had shown up. Unannounced, their presence a mystery to many. And there, in front of it all, stood Colonel Teresa Maddox, head of the Sniper Certification Division. Her reputation was ironclad, known for her unrelenting discipline, her sky-high standards, and the way she made sure medals weren't handed out unless someone had truly earned them. Avery had heard stories, seen her in action. This wasn't someone who ever softened her gaze or lowered her voice for anyone. Backstage, Avery stood tall but didn't let her composure slip. Her breath was steady, but her palms felt damp against the crisp starch of her uniform. She didn't show fear, not outwardly. She had trained for this. But the anticipation creeping through the air, it was new. The crowd quieted. Every chair seemed to hold its breath. We often say excellence needs no introduction. Colonel Maddox began, her voice firm and commanding. There was something about her presence, the way she filled the room without trying. But sometimes it deserves recognition. A silence followed, the kind that made every inch of skin stand at attention. A few weeks ago, Maddox continued, her words slow and deliberate, we had a training exercise that turned very real. Her eyes scanned the room as if measuring each face, each soul present. An unauthorized hostile force breached our perimeter. One of our teams got isolated, exposed, surrounded. They were in the fight of their lives. She let the weight of her words sit. The room shifted, restless. In that moment, one soldier stepped forward. Not because she was told to, Maddox said, her voice thick with pride, but because she was ready. She had prepared for this her whole life. Avery stood motionless, her pulse thumping in her ears. She could feel the eyes of everyone in that room land on her as Maddox's gaze turned toward her. Corporal Avery Collins, Maddox announced, front and center. The quiet made every step Avery took toward the stage feel like the most important thing in the world. No fanfare, no applause, just the rhythmic echo of her boots against the floor. A sound so steady it could have been mistaken for a heartbeat. The spotlight hit her like a weight. And then Colonel Maddox spoke again. Corporal Collins not only saved her team, Maddox said, lifting a small velvet box from the podium. She opened it slowly, deliberately, and inside it gleamed the Distinguished Service Medal, the kind that was reserved for those far above her rank. She shattered every assumption made about her. Avery felt the weight of the room shift. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch, because the truth had just been revealed, and it was a truth she'd never sought to hide. But Maddox wasn't done. What most don't know, she continued, her voice lowering in intensity, is that Corporal Collins comes from one of the most elite sniper bloodlines in American military history. Whispers swept through the room like fire, igniting every corner of it. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Samuel Collins, served 3 tours in Vietnam, Maddox went on. 217 confirmed eliminations. Medal of Honor, Silver Star. He was a tactician so precise that his training methods were studied in secret by the Army's most advanced programs. Avery stood frozen, the air around her thick with the weight of history. The truth was out now, but she didn't show it. No smiles, no flicker in her eyes. She remained a statue, the only thing moving being the ever-so-slight rise and fall of her chest. Then, after a brief pause, Maddox stepped back. Corporal Collins, I'd have prepared some remarks, she said, nodding toward Avery. The mic was cold against Avery's fingers as she stepped up, standing taller than she felt. She glanced out across the room. She didn't see ranks. She didn't see officers, recruits, or civilians. She saw faces. The faces of those who had deluded her, disregarded her, turned their backs on her not weeks ago. I was told I didn't belong here, she began. Her voice didn't tremble. I was told I wasn't tough enough, not sharp enough, not cold enough. She paused, let the silence sink in. I was told I was a distraction, a liability, a mistake. She could feel the weight of every skeptical eye, but she didn't waver. She didn't back down. But bullets don't care who pulls the trigger, she said, her words cutting through the quiet room. The mission doesn't care about your gender, and death doesn't stop to check your resume before it shows up. From the front row, she noticed someone straighten up, then another. It was a small shift, but it was enough to make her believe. You don't have to look like them, she said, her voice steady, confident. You just have to be ready when no one else is. In that moment, in that room full of former skeptics now turned witnesses, they were listening. They had no choice but to listen. That night, a clip of her speech circulated through military forums. By the morning, it had gone viral. Millions of eyes had seen a young woman in a perfectly pressed uniform stand up and quietly, firmly rewrite the rules of what it meant to serve. 6 months after her speech had shaken the walls of Fort Rivington, Avery Collins stood on the edge of a windswept cliff in northern Spain. The Atlantic wind screamed past her, relentless and unforgiving. Below her, 12 of the world's finest soldiers were preparing for the mission of a lifetime. Their focus was absolute, each one adjusting scopes, tightening straps, calibrating for crosswinds. This wasn't Fort Rivington. And this certainly wasn't the same world she had known before. The training was relentless, as it always was. This was Ghost Squadron, a covert multinational task force established under the quiet coordination of U.S. Special Operations Command and its allies. Its mission was simple but critical. Operate where politics couldn't, eliminate threats before they could take form in headlines, and protect lives with precision and silence. Avery Collins led it, though officially her rank still bore the insignia of a corporal. But in Ghost Squadron, titles were irrelevant. Here, command was earned, not given. And Avery had earned hers without doubt. The team was carefully selected, not for optics, but for sheer capability. Among them were 3 former members of Delta Force, 2 ex-MI6 operatives, a Canadian Arctic Ranger, a French commando sniper, a South Korean scout whose infiltration skills were unmatched, and an Afghan markswoman who had once defended her village alone for 8 days until rescue arrived. They came from different countries, languages, and branches of the military, but they all spoke one language: discipline. And every single one of them followed Avery, not because she was the loudest, not because she boasted of past accomplishments, but because they had seen it. The footage, the mission reports, the whispered stories about Nevada, about the ambush, how she moved before anyone could react, how 3 bodies hit the dirt before her team even realized they were under fire. She never spoke of it. She didn't need to. Training under Avery was unlike anything any of them had ever known. There was no room for bravado, no speeches to fire them up, no chest-thumping drills. Instead, it was about precision, about perfecting the fundamentals and living them. She taught them how to shoot in absolute silence, how to breathe in sync with the terrain, how to calculate not just wind and drop, but intent, emotion, hesitation. It wasn't just about hitting a target, it was about understanding the context in which the shot was fired. At night, she passed on pages from her grandfather's field diary, dog-eared, handwritten notes filled with the experiences of Samuel Collins during his time in Vietnam. They studied how he could track movements without GPS, how he could determine whether an enemy was left or right-handed by the position of their footprints, how he knew when not to fire, because the real target was fear. Furry would walk down the firing line, stopping behind each soldier. She didn't lecture or criticize. She'd simply say again or watch your drift, or sometimes just give a single nod and move on. They listened. When she spoke, it mattered. Oh, respect wasn't something Avery demanded. It was something she gave freely, and in return, it was earned. She never asked for permission to lead. One evening, during a live operation at a classified facility in Eastern Europe, Callum Rhee, her second-in-command and an older Scottish veteran, approached her while the squad was reviewing satellite images. "Ever get tired of proving yourself, boss?" he asked, half in jest. Avery didn't look up from the map. "I don't prove anything anymore," she replied quietly. "I just train them so they won't have to." Callum gave a single nod, then quietly stepped away. Over the next several months, Ghost Squadron conducted operations across 6 countries. They dismantled a human trafficking pipeline in the Balkans, intercepted a rogue missile shipment off the Horn of Africa, and rescued a kidnapped journalist from a jungle compound without firing a single shot. No unit patches, no press, no awards, just results. Avery kept a photo taped inside her gear locker. It was an old black and white picture of her grandfather, Samuel Collins, in jungle fatigues, holding a rifle and wearing a half smile under retired eyes. Next to the photo was a note she had written: "You don't need noise to leave an echo." Every time her team assembled on a new ridgeline, blending into the shadows before the storm, the world didn't notice. But it slept a little safer, knowing that Ghost Squadron was watching and that Avery Collins was leading them. Then, one night, just after midnight, a message came through. Avery was in her quarters at a NATO forward operating base near Sievo, going over mission logs from their latest operation. The lights were dim, and the desert wind whispered through the seams of the tent. Her encrypted tablet pinged softly. The sender, Department of Army Archives, Family Records Division. Subject, request for secure contact. Rhee, Samuel Collins, declassified. Her heart skipped a beat. For years, her grandfather's military file had been Every effort she had made to dive deeper into the murky depths of her grandfather's past had ended in polite but firm refusal. No further access. Restricted clearance. Records unavailable. That was the standard response. Until now. This time, things felt different. Avery activated the secure communications line. A low hum filled the room as the connection was established. The screen flickered, and a woman appeared. In her 60s, her sharp eyes seemed to scrutinize every pixel on the screen. She wore a crisp uniform, and the calm confidence she radiated hinted at a lifetime of secrets she would never openly share. "This is Colonel Diane Mercer, Intelligence Oversight Division." The woman's voice was steady, controlled. "Thank you for responding, Corporal Collins." Avery blinked, momentarily stunned by the formality of it all. "Yes, ma'am," she said, the words coming out as a reflex. "You said this is about my grandfather?" Colonel Mercer nodded with a slow, deliberate motion. "Up until last week, your grandfather's operations were classified under the codename Black Signal. But with the recent declassification of Vietnam-era records and your own exemplary service, we've been authorized to grant you access to a file that's been locked away for years. It's now for your eyes only." Avery's heart skipped. The words echoed in her head, but she remained silent, letting the colonel continue. Mercer leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Your grandfather, Samuel Collins, wasn't just a decorated sniper. He was part of a covert strike unit, one that operated far beyond the reach of standard military operations. A unit known as Silent Thunder." The words hit Avery like a punch in the gut. "Silent Thunder?" Avery whispered, her mind racing. "Yes. It was a Black Ops program designed for extreme denial missions, operating in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and several other nations that we still can't disclose publicly," Mercer explained, her tone unwavering. Avery's pulse quickened. It was like a veil had lifted, revealing things she hadn't even known were hidden. Now it all made sense. The quiet strength her grandfather had always carried, the way he moved like a shadow, the way his silence spoke volumes even in the stillness of Montana's snow-covered landscape. Mercer's voice cut through her thoughts. "Samuel Collins' official military record shows 217 confirmed eliminations." She paused, letting the number settle in the air before adding, "The real number was over 400, and he was one of only 3 snipers in U.S. history to reach that kind of count." Avery's breath caught. Her grandfather had been more than a legend. He had been something else entirely. "But there's more," Mercer continued, her gaze steady. "Before his death, your grandfather made a recommendation to revive Silent Thunder. He submitted a proposal that included a new operational doctrine and a name." Mercer tapped something on her screen, and Avery's personnel file flashed up briefly. Her breath hitched as her name appeared. "Yours," Mercer said simply. Avery froze. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it certainly wasn't this. "You're not being recruited," the colonel clarified, almost as if reading her thoughts. "We're asking if you want to inherit the command structure of a reactivated Silent Thunder directive, a next-generation version. Full international reach, deep cover teams, operations that never officially happened." The room seemed to close in on Avery. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating. "Ghost Squadron already functions in some capacity like Silent Thunder once did," Mercer continued. "But this would be something more. You wouldn't just lead the missions. You'd shape the doctrine. Choose the operatives. Build the legacy." Avery stood motionless, staring at the screen. The weight of the decision pressed on her chest, and for a long moment she said nothing. Finally she spoke, her voice quieter than she intended. "Why me?" Mercer didn't flinch. She answered without hesitation. "Because you have already proven what took others years to accomplish. You lead without ego, you train without arrogance, you operate without failure. And frankly, no one has ever replicated your grandfather's tactical profile. No one else has the combination of skills, mindset, and leadership that you do." Avery's mind flashed back to her childhood, to the hours spent training under her grandfather's careful guidance. She thought of the way he had taught her to line up a sniper's scope when she was just 7 years old. His calm, steady voice, his unwavering confidence that she could handle anything. Even back then, she had felt the pressure of his legacy, the weight of what it meant to carry his name. She turned toward the window, looking out over the dark, quiet base. In the distance, a light blinked atop a communications tower, a lone signal in the darkness. It was as though the universe itself was watching, waiting for her answer. She knew what she had to do. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "But on three conditions." Mercer raised an eyebrow, waiting for Avery to speak. "I keep my current team," Avery said, her eyes locked on the screen. "I won't abandon them." "Approved," Mercer replied almost immediately, no sign of hesitation. Avery's breath deepened. "Any operation involving civilians requires my direct consent. No political games." Mercer nodded. "Understood." "And," Avery added, her voice steady but with a quiet conviction, "we start a training pipeline for the next generation. Men, women, all of them." The colonel's face softened slightly. "Those were Samuel's terms too," she said, her tone holding a trace of nostalgia. "In 1975. Avery nodded, her resolve solidifying with each passing second. The screen flickered, and then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it went black. Silence settled in the room, heavy and final. And just like that, Silent Thunder had returned. Not as a distant memory, but as a living, breathing operation, and Avery Collins stood at its helm. For her, it had never been about the medals. It had never been about seeking glory, recognition, or proving anyone wrong. It had always been about one thing: making sure no one else had to walk the same lonely path she had, carrying the weight of a legacy that had been doubted every step of the way. When she accepted the reins of Silent Thunder, she did so on her own terms, with the full understanding of the road ahead. And when she did, the legacy of Samuel Collins was no longer just a shadow. It became something alive again, something Avery would mold into a force greater than anything before. Every member of Ghost Squadron had been with her from the very start. Together, they had trained, endured hardships, and crossed borders under the cover of night. Their only guides had been silent signals, a shared trust, and the unspoken bond of experience. Avery's first and most important rule was that no operation would ever put civilian lives at risk. Silent Thunder was to remain a scalpel, never a hammer. She wasn't in the business of indiscriminate destruction. Precision was key. But there was one more thing, something more personal to her than any mission. They would not only be a strike team. They would be a legacy. They would train others, and not in secret. There would be no classified files hidden away, no names erased by time. This training would be deliberate, open, and methodical. Men, women, people from all walks of life, if they had the fire in them, Avery would give them the forge. Silent Thunder was no longer just a unit. It was a movement, a force that would endure beyond its time. Their new facility didn't appear on any maps. Hidden deep within a cold mountain range, straddling the line between nations, it was part fortress, part training ground, part tomb for things too dangerous for the world to know. It was carved directly into the rock, blending into the landscape as though it had always been there. There were no decorations, no trophies on the walls, no grand speeches or photo galleries. But on the first door every recruit walked through, 4 words were etched in steel: "Be your own guardian." It had been the last line in Samuel Collins's jargon, and Avery made it her guiding principle. As the years passed, governments rose and fell, headlines changed with the tides, but the world slept a little more soundly and never knew why. Terror cells crumbled just days before their attacks. Chemical weapon stockpiles vanished without a trace. A child abducted in Istanbul was found, safe and sound, back in her bed by the morning. The shadow moved unnoticed through the city. The shot fired from 2 ridgelines away, never heard. But among soldiers and operatives, the initials STS began to appear in footnotes and whispered conversations. And in those circles, respect for Avery and her squad grew. It wasn't a respect earned through medals or time spent in service, but through something far more powerful. It was the kind of respect shared between veterans over drinks, or passed between them in hushed tones on rooftops or across cobblestone streets. They'd say she could see the target before the drone did. That her team moved like smoke, silent and deadly, never missing. They called her the ghost of the trigger, but Avery never sought that legend. What mattered most to her was what happened late at night in the mountains when new recruits sat around the fire after their first brutal day. That's when Avery would pass them the same worn copy of her grandfather's field journal. The pages were covered in ink stains, sweat, and desert sand, each one telling a story of a life lived in the margins of society. And beside it, she'd place her own additions, lessons she'd learned over years of living on the edge of silence. She'd look them in the eye and say, "We don't pull the trigger to prove we're right. We pull it when we're the only ones left to stop what's coming." One snowy morning, Avery stood alone in the lowest chamber of the compound, looking out over the firing range. A new class of snipers was training, their targets so far away they couldn't be seen with the naked eye. But they trusted, as they had been taught, that the target was there. Avery wore no ribbons, no medals, only the insignia she had created herself. It was a simple emblem, a hawk in flight, carved into a small piece of metal. It wasn't flashy, but it was hers. A ping interrupted her thoughts. A message appeared on her encrypted tablet: high-value target, ungoverned zone, a threat too dangerous for any agency to touch without sparking war. Avery didn't flinch. She tapped the screen twice. Her team would be ready by nightfall. As she turned to leave, her hand brushed against the frame of a photo mounted on the wall. It was one she had placed there herself. In the photo, Samuel Collins was holding a young Avery on his knee. Both of them were covered in dust, ear protection in place, but there was a connection between them that transcended everything else. Beneath the photo, she had written a line from her grandfather's journal: "Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's who's ready to carry it forward." And Avery Collins had made sure of one thing: there would always be someone ready. In a world that was changing faster than anyone could keep up with, where headlines constantly shifted and respect was often confused with noise, the story of Avery Collins served as a reminder of something deeply human and deeply American. Character still mattered. It wasn't about loud voices, empty titles, or being seen. It was about quiet strength, the kind of strength that shows up when it's needed, the kind that chooses duty over ego and discipline over attention. It was about honoring those who came before by preparing those who came after. Avery never asked to lead. She never demanded a seat at the table. She just kept showing up. The path to earning respect and trust is often paved by quiet, deliberate actions, each one a deliberate decision, a step forward in an ongoing journey. It's a lesson that applies not only to those who wear uniforms, but also to those who stand beside them, sharing in the weight of duty. Whether you're in the workplace, among family, or within your community, ask yourself, are you the person others turn to when things grow quiet? When the pressure mounts, are you ready to act, not for recognition or reward, but because you understand the need to protect others? In those moments when everything seems to hinge on a single decision, it's not the loudest voices or the most noticeable actions that matter most. It's the ones that come with no fanfare. It's the ones that, in their stillness, speak volumes. And perhaps the most crucial question is, what kind of legacy are you quietly building when no one is watching? Because not every mission will make the headlines, not every hero will have a medal to wear, but some make their mark in a way that goes unnoticed by the world, passing down a better path for others to follow without ever seeking praise. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever met someone like Avery? Someone who stood firm, quiet but strong, their dignity unshaken, and changed the lives of others without needing any recognition? Share your story with us in the comments. Your words might be the voice that reminds someone else they are seen and appreciated. If this story has resonated with you, if it reminded you of someone you admire or respect, we invite you to show your support. Like the video, subscribe to our channel, and join us in preserving the stories that matter. Because whether it's a nurse, a veteran, a parent, or a mentor, the legacies that shape America are often the quietest ones. Stories told without recognition until the moment they are needed most. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story. And always remember, you don't need to be loud to make history. You just need to be.